Yes. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the weekly Armchair Sports Talk. I'm your host for the evening, Jamie, and I'm joined by the very handsome pair of Mark and Keane. Unfortunately, Phil had to pull out of the show, but God, what a good replacement we've got here in Keane. We're here tonight to talk about David De Gea, but first, gentlemen, I hope you're doing really well. How are you? Just don't all jump in at once. Good.
No, sorry, mate.
Something to use at the top there, but
Yeah, listen, it's nice to be back. Obviously, I missed the reaction the other day. I had a power cut in the house, which was an absolute nightmare. Jamie, I just want to say, mate, it's lovely to have you hosting, and thanks for the introduction, brother.
You're very welcome. Keane, how are you, my man?
Good. You know what? It's actually great to have a week off from United, like in terms of like games. I think like it's been so regimented in the last kind of 6 months where you've had a game like every 2-3 days, and we've just been talking about previews and who's going to start. So it's kind of good to have a chat about something else and kind of do it in a kind of more relaxed environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure how relaxed this environment's going to be, but obviously there's a big topic amongst United fans at the minute. It's a real hotbed of discussion, and it's all about the man David De Gea and the rumours that United are ready to extend his contract and to keep him around the club for a lot longer. Obviously, Erik ten Hag's come out and made his comments about how he has no problems with David De Gea, that he wants him around at the club. Mark, do you think that Ten Hag's comments are really indicative of his opinion, or is it a little bit of transfer mastermindery?
Yeah, listen, I don't think we've seen this on a few occasions, and I'll give you a couple of examples with Ten Hag as well. Ronaldo, constantly he was pressed and asked the questions about his viewpoint, how he was in the dressing room, whether he was going to be integral to the team, and he always came out with positives. And it would be, I would be more worried if he came out and said, no, we're going to be getting rid of him. I think that's the wrong way to deal with it. It's not going to give anybody any sort of positives. And love you, Tash, mate. We always take the piss out of it, but yeah, looking great. Yeah, it's not gonna give anyone. It's not going to help anyone by him saying he's going to go. And I think that you have to take all these things with a pinch of salt. I think that he's just tried to diffuse the situation by saying that they want him in the club. I don't know whether that's true. I don't know whether it's false. Only time will tell. And of course, come the summer, maybe one more year. I don't think we'll get rid of him this summer. I think he'll stay for another. If he gets sold, then we know that it was rubbish.
Yeah, spot on. Keane, just obviously on the back of what Mark said there, do you think the club are right at this point to even be thinking about sitting down and discussing contract terms with him? The reports coming out that it's already been agreed. What do you make of it?
It's mad because I think the last few months, isn't it? It's been saying that they're discussing new terms. They're discussing reduced wages, and he actually declined the first 2 offers that we put in for like reduced wages, and now we're seeing performance-based incentives being thrown in there. So I don't know, is it a case where De Gea is kind of looking at it in a way that he may have to work for his place next year? Because I definitely think, look, if I be brutally honest, he shouldn't be at the club next season if we're really going to be honest about it and look to implement Erik ten Hag's style of play. Look, he's been a good servant. Look, we see at the start of the season he was slightly adapting to Ten Hag's style of play, but as we've seen with you take out Martinez, you take out Varane, Casemiro's suspended for a few games. All of a sudden, we see he's not capable. He's not getting protected. Look, he's been a great servant, and the one thing I just want to make it very clear before, people who are going to listen to this podcast live or they're going to listen to this on the replay. I respect him for what he's done for this football club. He's been a brilliant footballer, brilliant goalkeeper, especially when. Post Sir Alex, when we went through the pits and we went through a really bad period, he was probably our best player. And look, he deserves respect, and he will always have that respect. But we've always said this about players like Harry Maguire, Cristiano Ronaldo, who Mark mentioned. Sentimentality has to kind of leave itself at the door now. And while it would be good to see him to maybe stay next year, maybe potentially win a couple of trophies in another successful season, how long do you keep him there, and kind of stagnate the style of play that we want to play? How long more do we I suppose, put up with mistakes in games in very crucial situations. And like, how much credit do you have in the bank before it eventually runs out? And I think the one thing I want to see with David De Gea with this is I don't want him to stay here too long for these mistakes, these errors that he's making in terms of saves, or the poor distribution to cloud what he's actually achieved at the club. And like we've seen happen with previous players before. So it's just a sticky situation. When I look at himself, I think personal pride has to come into it. And if you do care about your United legacy, there is potential growth there for him to maybe stay here too long. And what I mean by that is, let's say Harry Maguire leaves this summer, lads. Let's just say Maguire leaves. Who's going to be number one scapegoat in this fan base? It's going to be De Gea. All that abuse that Harry Maguire gets, you know what the online fan base is like? It's very fickle. They will jump on him, and they will disregard everything he's done for this football club. So not only from a style of play standpoint, but I think for him himself, if he left this summer now, it would be the right time for me.
Yeah, 100%. And to touch on what you've said there, I think one of the biggest problems that we have had, and we'll touch on this a little bit later, is about moving players on at the right time. And, there is no room for sentiment in football. If you want to be successful, you have to be ruthless. And the best coaches, the best clubs know how to either remove a player from the squad to get the best return on their investment, or to minimise the damage that they'll cause by hanging around. David De Gea, for me, obviously, the guy's a United legend, 100%. You don't become the record appearance holder as a goalkeeper. And we'll talk about clean sheets and the misnomer that they are, but he's the record clean sheet holder, so he has his place in United folklore. What is happening now, and Evan's spot on here, is that the mentality that quite a lot of the fan base have at the minute will start to spread to the majority of the fan base, and the more he costs us, the more the errors, these calamitous errors that we see, and the more the stats go against him, the more the clubs start to forget what he's done for us in the past. Also forget, that game against Arsenal where he set the record for the most amount of saves. The guy was a man possessed. I think he finished to 16, 17, I think it was that season. He had like a plus 13 PSXG, absolutely ridiculous stats. They'll forget all about that, and because football suffers from recency bias, and before you know it, like Evan's spot on, the club hate him. So, Mark, I'm going to come to you then. David De Gea's contributions over the years, obviously, no one's questioning that, no one's saying that. But is it wrong that he's still at the club now?
I don't think it's wrong that he's at the club now, but I think you both touched upon this. I think that we do have to be very careful, and I think ultimately this comes back to Manchester United and how they operate as a club. On a few occasions, and I know you'll probably talk about this later, you talk about Wayne Rooney. He probably was overplayed for maybe 2 or 3 seasons, wasn't up to the standards that were needed, and was probably kept on too long. But the problem is, because United, and particularly the Glazers at the moment, aren't prepared to reinvest, to sign someone else for Rooney. We still haven't got a replacement for Ronaldo. We're not ready to spend, unfortunately, maybe 40, 50, 60 million plus for a goalkeeper, because that's kind of what the numbers you're looking at for in the current market. I think that's what it comes down to, and I think that it's not David De Gea's fault. Okay, he has been a great servant, as you said, back in the 2016 season, the year that we won the Europa League. His numbers were astronomical and very, very good. It's not his fault that he has started to decline. And the thing is, we've been very used to players 36, 37, Van der Sar, nearly 40 by the time that he retired. And that doesn't necessarily work as much now. You don't see that so often. I think that because, the regimes, the structures, the training, everything that's in place means that players tend to sort of fall by the wayside a lot quicker. But again, we couldn't have predicted this. You can't put a timeline on these sorts of things. 2 seasons ago, if you would have sold him, everyone would have probably said, "No, you can't. You've got to be joking." You just can't put a figurative value on these kind of things, and I think really you have to look at how the club is run and why we're in this position.
Yeah, spot on. Julia, just before I welcome you, I'm just going to pull this up by Trevor. Trevor, we're going to address this a little bit further on, so I don't want you to think I'm ignoring your comment. Nice to see you in the comments again, but hang about and we'll discuss this as a group, because this is a really, really contextual issue with David De Gea. It's very multi-layered and we can really dig into this. So it's a great comment. Julio, thank you very much for joining us. I'll come to you quickly then. Obviously, we're talking about the rumours of David De Gea signing a new contract. Give us your thoughts on the potential of him staying at the club for another 12 months, 24 months, whatever it might be.
Good evening, gentlemen. Sorry I'm late. I was out watching the Champions League game, and as an avid AC Milan fan, I couldn't stand being out there because I was in a bar full of Inter Milan fans, weirdly enough. I don't know where they came from, but no.
I thought you got Reece on for a minute then. He's an AC fan as well.
Yeah. Yeah, me and him share some discussions regarding Milan. Yeah, I tuned in just on the way home, just before I got in. And listen, I think you've all touched on the main points. I think, me personally, you see all the the big noise on Twitter about it, and lots of people obviously unhappy about it. I don't think it's the end of the world, because I think it's a scenario where a goalkeeper of David De Gea's quality, shot stopping wise, yes, he made a mistake last week, but his shot stopping seems to be the big thing. And throughout the season, there have been all sorts of reports around him. I remember one being a few months ago that the scouts were looking at his replacements. They couldn't see value in the market, which I know sounds ridiculous, but given what we're seeing reports wise regarding transfer budget, targets, fees, positions, recruitment, regarding all this, it doesn't surprise me in the slightest, and I don't think it guarantees his number one spot for next season. I really don't think that Ten Hag's sitting there and is just blind to what we're seeing. The problem, obviously, you've got is, because I know Ten Hag, I think we've all seen the reports that he wants a good standard of goalkeepers, but like 3 of them, because of different injury issues he's had at Ajax prior. The problem is, I think Ten Hag's looking at it and going, it could be a case where he's looking at the other 2 goalkeepers he's got and he thinks they're no better on the ball. So he'd rather stick with the best shot stopper he's got, because it's clear that for a goalkeeper, Ten Hag wants a good shot stopper and someone who's competent on the ball. And the big issue is, obviously, like, who comes in. I've been saying for a couple of months now that it wouldn't surprise me if Dean Henderson comes in and gets a second chance in pre-season. Now, the problem we had 2 years ago was a similar thing. This isn't the first time in De Gea's career someone else at the club has could potentially replace him. It happened in his first season with Lindegaard, and the plan was Lindegaard would play the league games and De Gea would play the Europa League games. But then Lindegaard got injured with his ankle that same day and was out for the rest of the season. We saw Henderson come in, who I remember seeing shot stopping wise, I didn't think he was any better. And this was an out of form De Gea at the time. But obviously, I think there looked to be a little bit more competency with Henderson on the ball, but barely. So it is a big question mark as to, there's a lot of different things you have to consider with this new contract. I personally don't think that it's the end of the world. I think that, I think we've seen other clubs make this kind of decision before. I think it's more reminiscent of Arsenal when they replaced Leno with Ramsdale, because Leno at the time was also a good shot stopper. He wasn't particularly bad in that Arsenal team compared to what Pep did and what Klopp did. But it's a lot of issues elsewhere De Gea has that it looks like he needs replacing. And I don't think we'll see a proper replacement for at least another year. I think Henderson will come in. Maybe he might not like maybe he might feel like he'll be given false pretenses by coming back and being told you'll challenge. But I genuinely think that he'll get given a run out in pre-season to see what he's about. And it's just, there's a lot of things at play here. But on the contract, I don't think it's the end of the world. I think if he's going to stick around for at least another year, then it'll be interesting to see where Ten Hag goes with it.
Yeah, nice one. Thank you very much. And I'd also just before Keane, I come to you, I'd just like to preface this by saying that obviously this is not a reactionary video. We've been talking Mark, Keane, and I have been having the conversations around the Gea fee for a couple of years now. So I'd just like to say that we're not jumping on this as a really reactionary thing just for the mistake against West Ham. That I've seen that a few times coming up on in the comments. It's more a case of it's a discussion of the longevity of somebody recognising their previous achievements at a football club, but understanding when's the right time to crack on and move on. But Keane, I'll come to you just off the back of what Julio said there.
Yeah, look, I've been saying it in regards to Dean Henderson. Eric Ten Hag wanted him at Ajax last season, and the club refused to even go out on loan. And Evan says anyone thinks Henderson's the answer is wrong. I think he's a short-term answer. I really do think Dean Henderson is a short-term answer next season, especially if our outlay on transfers next year is going to be quite low, especially if we don't finish in the Champions League places. Let's say if we're going to put that into perspective, I think he comes out off his line, he sweeps, he collects crosses, his distribution is good, he saves penalties, which is something David De Gea doesn't do. And again, that's just fact. You can check the facts. But I do think if you're looking at a short-term option, Dean Henderson would be okay, especially if we don't have the money to buy a goalkeeper. You can talk about that TalkSport interview, but sure, how many interviews has Harry Maguire done? Where how many social media posts has he done? And he's still here, in that regard. So at the end of the day, I think it's the one where we have to look at it from perspective of, if we play David De Gea in a system next season, in a proactive system, and Ten Hag allows that back four to press a bit higher and not be as deep as it is right now, we're in big trouble. We're in big trouble. I can tell you that straight. You look at our back four right now, it's not as high as it should be, as the way Eric Ten Hag plays football. And I think the big problem is, if we keep him for 12 months, he won't be able to do the things that a keeper of that style will need to do. You look at Liverpool, Alisson, City with Ederson, Brentford with David Raya. Their back fours are able to press up. There's a reason why Brentford are able to play high up the pitch with Ben Mee playing centre half. It's because the keeper does his job behind them. Greg Chambers is probably going to get into the comments in a minute and say it's all about playing out from the back. It really isn't. There's different facets of goalkeeping that David De Gea simply isn't doing. And there's a very misleading kind of maybe is he
nonsense.
Is he that much better? I don't know. If you look at the stats and all different aspects of goalkeeping, but the problem with this situation is that if we really want to be proactive next season, David De Gea cannot be in goal. It's just simple as that. And are we really going to go down the road of risking stagnating another 12 to 18 months of development because we have, I suppose, loyalty to someone who was not fitted to the system? Jose got rid of Wayne Rooney, like you said, when Wayne Rooney didn't suit the style of playing, didn't have the energy to play in the system that he did. Fergie got rid of Juan Sebastian Veron because he couldn't play, in 4-4-2, there's many different players who played this football club who didn't suit an ideology, who didn't suit a style of play, that who are quality, they're world class, and couldn't play there. Right now, David De Gea, he was a world class keeper, but he's regressed. He's a very good goalkeeper now. He's not elite anymore. He's in that bracket of below elite, if you're looking at the way football has evolved in the last 5 to 6 years. And that's why, I'm saying this in a respectful way, that for his own sake and for our own sake, even if he doesn't part ways, he should be number 2 next season. He should be number 2. And whether it's a case we bring in a cheap goalkeeper for 30, 40 million, I know 30, 40 million people are saying cheap, but in this current market, that's what we're probably going to have to look at. But I really wholeheartedly believe, and I've been like you said, Jamie, we've been discussing this for 2 years now, as long as I've known you anyway, and Mark as well, that David De Gea if you look at the way we want to play, and even when Solskjaer wanted to play a high line, we could see the deficiencies. When Henderson came in the 21 season, remember how we were able to play a high line with Maguire and Lindelof? It's because he was able to come out off his line, collect crosses, he was able to sweep, he was able to distribute. There's a reason why we kept a good clean sheet record in that second half of the season. We need a goalkeeper who was commanding, and right now, David De Gea, isn't it at the minute? Oh, you bastard, Trevor.
I think just to come in on a couple of points, got a few things to say. I think ultimately,
Here we go.
Football is cyclical.
That's saying.
Continuously evolving. Positions, players, how they do things, and the goalkeeper is no exception. Okay. One thing, obviously, we've spoken about is the fact that there's always a scapegoat, and I do believe that is the case. Unfortunately, when players make mistakes, people do jump on their back, and I don't think we're ever going to get away from that. We do have a small minority of the fan base that do like to go in, that do like to sort of look at what's happened and then ridicule them for that. But I don't think, we can't control that. Nobody really can control that. And I think that's always going to be the case. So even if Harry Maguire does go, David De Gea will get it. They've just got to try and ignore it. Do you know what I mean? They have to. That's the only thing you can do. Unfortunately, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, we didn't have social media. And unfortunately, they weren't able to see what was going on behind the scenes and all the conversations that may and may not have happened. Okay? It's just one of those things. Unfortunately, with David De Gea, he is regressing. He is going downhill, and I do think it's an option. Look, people will go and say, that's not the only option, the only issue at United. Absolutely right. We need to get number 9. The reason why we aren't winning games at the moment is because we can't press high enough, we can't create enough, and ultimately we haven't got a number 9 to score goals. Absolutely, that's problem number 1. However, because that then has an effect on everything else. We're playing further back. We're trying to build up more from the back. We've got no Martinez at the moment. I think that's a massive problem. I don't blame Maguire. I don't blame Lindelof. And I don't blame David De Gea solely. I think that they both play into each other. I think if you've got a one-man defender, i.e. Martinez, that's able to be more spatially aware, can receive the pass and be confident and calm under that and be able to know that his next move 2 or 3 passes ahead, David De Gea isn't probably going to be making the mistake by passing to the wrong player, by passing to Maguire against Sevilla. Do you know what I mean? And that is a problem. I do think it kind of works hand in hand. But just to give you a few other bits as well, and I'll stop, I promise. The only 2 goalkeepers with less save percentage this season in the Premier League are both Gavin Bazuna and Alex McCarthy, both at Southampton, okay? And normally, as a shot-stopping percentage, you look at anything really between 65% and 80%, give or take. David De Gea is sitting at about 70%. Now, in the top 5 leagues, that's in the 57% percentile. That's average, okay? For expected goals, he only saves 50% of those. He's in 50% percentile of that as well, and it's at minus 0.05. In comparison, Alisson, from expected goal ratio, and I know XG is all a bit up in the air and people don't necessarily agree with it, but he saves 9.3. Okay, there's a figurative value on that. I can share these afterwards and you'll understand a bit more. So it all is telling, really. Stopping crosses, we know that he isn't very commanding, okay, and he only gets to, per 90, 3.2% of those. In comparison, you've got keepers such as Alisson and Edison that are getting at least 30-odd%. That's a huge increase, okay? And listen, it's a very difficult subject. You were right earlier. We're not trying to jump on the bandwagon. We're not trying to be negative. We're just trying to kind of have a good conversation, try to give you as much information as you can, and kind of make a decent decision on that. And there's a lot of issues, and I think it is something we've got to look upon at some point.
Yeah, spot on. Cheers, Mark. So just a couple of things from me then, just on that, because one of the biggest sort of drawbacks of David De Gea in our system, like people have mentioned, is the inability to press high. The back 4 starting position always has to be a little bit deeper to cover for his inability to sweep and to claim crosses. But having Lissandro Martinez, Rafael Varane, Casemiro sort of is that triangle, between the two centre backs and the midfield, does sort of cover for his inadequacies a little bit. We can play a bit of a higher line because Martinez is smart enough and he's got the pace to recover. Varane's pretty quick as well. Martinez is absolutely mint on the ball. He's good at turning into tight areas. He's good on the half turn. He can receive the ball under pressure and he'll still be able to dispatch it. We've seen now that Martinez has been injured, and as mint as Luke Shaw's been covering at centre half, when we're playing Lindelof, who again, I don't think Lindelof is the worst centre half. One of the easiest things that teams are doing against United now is you press the back four. It is so simple for them in the first phase of our build-up. You watch, and every single team presses us because they know that the defence can't play back to David De Gea and then beat the press with a clip pass out to the fullback because De Gea doesn't have that in his locker. So if you're a team that's pressing us, like West Ham did it a few times and got joy out of it, two things are going to happen. Either the ball's going to back to David De Gea and he's going to make a mistake and you're going to receive the ball, or you're going to go long, it resets the press, you then are in the first phase of build-up and you can go again from there. And how many times this season have we seen a long ball from David De Gea result in a counter-attack from the opposition that they've had a bit of joy from, or a mistake where the Sevilla one's obviously the biggest one that comes to mind in terms of he's passed to Maguire. Maguire should not be calling for the ball, shouldn't be turning where he is, and the rest history. That, for me, is one of the biggest drawbacks. We can talk about, excuse me, his clean sheets and this, fugazi of his shot stopping and things like that. But any single team that comes up against us now knows 100%, especially while Lich is out injured, just press the back four and you'll get some joy out of it. And it immediately stagnates us in that first phase because we can't connect to midfield. And before you know it, we're just bogged down on our own half. So I just wanted to touch on that. And then I'm really, obviously, I'm glad Mark's come equipped with the stats there. That there's some fantastic stats, and that is a really nice segue into our next.
I've got more.
Oh, fantastic! I know you would. So, Julie, I'm going to come back to you, and it works. It's quite poetic because obviously you brought it up. Trevor's talking about it in the comments. Ravi as well. Thank you very much for joining us. I like this comment about United fans can't really move on. I want to talk about the idea of him being a great shot stopper because. Is he a great shot stopper, or does he look like a great shot stopper, or are we basing our judgment of him on his past seasons? Because obviously Mark's brought the stats there, but on a minute-to-minute, game-to-game basis, Julio, would you say that David De Gea is a good shot stopper?
He's not as good as he was, I will admit. He has regressed. I think part of it is because there's been some games where he's pulled off some good saves that have either kept some moments. Do you know what I mean? David De Gea this season has had some moments where he's kept us in games. He's pulled he can just have an average game at best, and then suddenly, I remember the Fulham game in the FA Cup. I think the start of the second half, Fulham were at it, and I think they had 2 or 3 really good chances in and around when Mitrovic scored, and De Gea kept us in the game. And then we all know what happened that day. I think that was the last time I was on with you, Jamie, actually, where that mad 2 minutes of red card, penalty, but De Gea got back into the team last season because of Henderson's illness, and he started that season really well as a shot stopper. As the season went, everything went really bad. We all saw what happened last season, and I think De Gea's not as good as he used to be. We all remember 4 or 5 years ago, he was arguably the best in the world, where he would just win games on his own sometimes. But I think now it's becoming a point where he'll pull up with some really good moments and pull out some really good saves. But overall, it's not all it seems. Like the clean sheet record, you could argue is a bit misconstrued, because I think as part of a clean sheet record, it's not just the goalkeeper. The goalkeeper definitely plays a part, but the defense also has a good part to play in it. Like we have seen really good defensive performances. We've seen some really good defensive performances this season. It's no coincidence that in this system, when we've played Varane or Martinez or Shaw or Lindelof, and that's not an agenda against Maguire. I just don't think he's that good for Ten Hag's high line, and I think it's the same problem with De Gea. And Keane touched on it earlier regarding Dean Henderson, because I've not had a theory, but it was something I've been meaning to look into from when he played a couple of years back, when Henderson was in the team a few years back. We saw a very solid defense with Maguire and Lindelof, which is something that still sometimes gets ridiculed to this day. And I do wonder that when sometimes the defense is playing around certain players that they feel nervous around. So take the Seville game, for example. We saw Maguire and De Gea at one point. Maguire was talking to him and giving a bit of like, communicate more, I think he was saying. Whereas, like, I'm not defending De Gea, I'm calling it how I see it, where he does produce some good moments, but he's not what he used to be. And I think are we all in agreement that De Gea, maybe his time has come a little bit?
Yeah, I would. Like, look, the thing about this is, like, I seen a comment just above a while ago saying like he's going for the Golden Glove for a reason. Well, I'll give you 3 reasons why we're going for the Golden Glove. Rafael Varane, Casemiro, Lisandro Martinez. They're massive contributing factors. That's the reason why our spine's a lot stronger this season, especially in home games. They've really cut out a lot of counterattacks and stuff. The reason why De Gea makes a couple of good saves is because he pumps it long. We lose the second ball in midfield, and all of a sudden, though, he has to make a save. It's down to his poor distribution, and that's why when he gets a pass back to him and he can't make up his mind where he's going to pass it, he punts into the middle of midfield where, if we be brutally honest, Christian Eriksen and Bruno Fernandes, they are brilliant creative players. They're not going to win a second ball. Like, anyone who knows football, who's played football, and you look at their style of play, they're not players who are going to go in and, let's say, I'm just going to bring up one player, for example, like in terms of winning second balls. Like, if you pump it long and, like, let's say Bruno is against Decore in midfield, let's say. Now, Bruno is a miles better footballer than Decore. But in a physical battle, who's going to win that 9 times out of 10? Decore will. 100%. And then that turnover happens, and all of a sudden, the shot's been there. Yeah, Casemiro's been poor for the last 6 weeks, but if you look at over a 38-game season, him and the 2 centre-backs have been a contributing factor as the reason why our defence is solid. Why is the defensive record improved this season when David De Gea has been in goal? But last season, it was shocking. It's not David De Gea, is it? It's the 3 new players who were in the team. So at the end of the day, like, again, I wanted to come across that as De Gea slander, but when new additions come into the team and all of a sudden we see an improvement in system, like, if you look at our possession stats, they're probably higher than what they were last season. You look at our record at home this season is better than last season. Our record at home last season was fucking shocking. We shipped 5 to Liverpool. We got played off the park at City. We beat the 2 of them this season. We've only lost 1 home game this season. Why is that? It's down to how solid we've been. Not down to David De Gea on his own. The clean sheet record is a collective. It's not just him.
You're spot on there, Keenan. I agree with everything you've said, and I'll come to you in a second, Mark. The thing I'd like to say on this is obviously, like, the clean sheet. No one's trying to rob David De Gea of collecting the Golden Glove at the end of the season. It's not like when Chris Smalling scored that own goal, at the end of 2016 to deny him. It was against Fulham. Can't remember, but something like that. But anyway, the clean sheets are such a weird metric in terms of judging an ability, and obviously we've spoken about this multiple times over the last few days. It's one of the only black and white stats that people accept as gospel rather than looking at other things. So with an attacking midfielder, people understand that as an assist is not the only be-all and end-all metric of that attacking midfielder or the creative midfielder, whoever you want to call it, of their ability, because for the assist to happen, the person they've created the chance for has to finish it off. So they look at other things. They look at things like big chances created. They look at ball retentions in the final third, and they'll build a bigger picture of the player. With goalkeepers, though, people seem to be stuck in this archaic rut of going, well, he's got 15 clean sheets. So that must mean he's good, and it's such a good test of seeing. Do people actually watch David De Gea week in, week out? Because David De Gea is not a better goalkeeper than Alisson. I'm sorry, Alisson's the best goalkeeper in the world. Thibaut Courtois has got an argument as well to be the best goalkeeper in the world. But when it comes to the Premier League, Alisson is up there, levels ahead of anyone else. Ederson probably second. David De Gea is nowhere near him, but he's got more clean sheets than the both of them. So for me, the easiest way to look at it and to understand that where a goalkeeper's place actually lies with the clean sheets is you look at things like the post-shot expected goal. You look at the chances of, the sort of level of chances and how high the shot percentages that were given away. What quality of chances are our defence given up to the opposition? And Mark might have the stat because obviously Mark's our statistician tonight. But as a defence, we've conceded a lot lower quality chance. Teams are having to got a low PSXG, but then David De Gea still has a negative PSXG. So that's why David De Gea is not the sole reason that the club has 15 clean sheets this season. Keane's spot on. The new additions, the way we're playing with Martinez and Varane. Luke Shaw has been resurgent this year. He's been absolutely phenomenal. And Wan-Bissaka, to detract from their performances by saying it's all because that David De Gea is, some mint shot stopper. Honestly, the facts and the evidence are there to show you that he's a net negative. The guy has been phenomenal since he joined us. Well, obviously he had a dodgy first couple of seasons, but he's the only player in that team that's won the Premier League with Manchester United. He's the only one that remembers what it was like to. Oh, sorry, respect Phil Jones. I always forget that he's still in our squad. But he's the only player in our matchday squad that's won the Premier League. And it's one of those things that you'd expect to see him shoulder a little bit more responsibility, and he doesn't. But anyway, that was just a quick little bit I just wanted to mention on there, is that the stats are there to provide you with enough information to make a good decision on goalkeeper ability. But Mark, I'm going to come to you and we're going to talk about the clean sheet stuff. I'm guessing you've got a few more stats to go into, our local statistician.
I have, and I'm sorry, I'm not hosting tonight, so I thought I'd bring some stats to the table. I just want to quickly talk about the shot thing just very briefly, just to kind of tie it up. We've already obviously clarified that he has 68% shot stopping, okay? And in the grand scheme of things, there's only two goalkeepers lower than that. But I feel that if you were to look back at it and really go through the games where he has made some very good saves that have kept us in the game, potentially won us 3 points, I think that he has actually been probably the master of our downfall. I think that obviously without Martinez and Varane at the back, there are a few more mistakes. We are playing lower and we are forcing ourselves into a position where he hasn't distributed correctly. It's coming back at us very quickly, and then he's forced into a save. But again, he's not saving as often as what we've spoken about before, and it's a lot lower than most. This whole 15 clean sheets thing, I think you summed it up very, very well, actually. And lots going on there, isn't there? Anyways, Statman, yeah. This whole 15 clean sheet thing is very much a misnomer, I think. And from the 15 clean sheets that he's got this season, right? That's 2 against Southampton, who was sitting in 20th, 1 against Everton, 2 against Forest, who were in 18th, 1 against Leeds, who were in 17th, 2 against Leicester, who were in 16th, 1 against West Ham, who were in 15th, 1 against Bournemouth, who were in 13th. 1 against Brentford, who were in 9th, 1 against Villa, who were in 8th, 1 against Spurs, who were 7th, and 1 against Newcastle, who were in 3rd. Nothing really of note, okay? So in 7 of 15 of those games...
Mark, see that one you mentioned about the Spurs game? We controlled that game from start to finish.
Yeah, and they didn't have anything. And this is what I was going into now. So in 7 of those 15 games, the defence reduce the opposition to less than 2 shots on target in the game. Okay? In 10 of the 15 games, the defence reduced the oppositions to 3 or less shots on goal for the entire game. And of his last 4 clean sheets he faced, just 3 shots on goal in all 4 games. That was against Brentford, that was against Everton, that was against Forest, and that was against Villa. Okay? So of those 15 clean sheets... he's had 2 quality games. Obviously, that came against Wolves and that came against Leeds. 5 shots and 6 shots, respectively. So 41 shots he's faced in that time as well. That's an average of 2.7 shots a game. In the Premier League, in 34 games, he's conceded 41 goals. In the Europa League, in 12 games, he's conceded 12 goals. In the FA Cup, in 5 games, he's conceded 4. And then in the EFL, which he hasn't actually played that often, he hasn't conceded any, but he's played 2 games. Okay, so in 53
didn't he, on purpose to fuck her?
Sorry?
Dubravka purposely tried to knock us out of that tournament. He tried so hard against Burnley that night. Fuck me, John. Talk about goalkeeping performances.
Mark, you sounded then like me trying to explain like my football manager career to my mates. The 32 seasons.
Did they understand you as well?
Town.
Did they understand you as well? Oh, there you go.
No, do you know what I mean?
Speaking
I'm listening to you there going.
Was almost reminiscent of Jose's football heritage speech a few years ago.
Yeah.
Just start listing different things and the receipts behind them. So.
It was delightful. It was absolutely delightful. Were you done, by the way, Mark? I don't know if Mark's about to...
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there is a bit more, but there is a bit more. But listen, I'm not going to bore you with all that. I think we've given enough tonight to kind of suggest, and give you a little bit more to not just saying David De Gea is not good enough. I think there's a lot more to it than that. I think that the combinations of defenders is also a part to play. I think that Henderson isn't the answer, as Keane said. I think that if you remember rightly, when David De Gea went through that poor run of form, and I remember having this conversation with Stu, and he'd back me on this, Henderson brought something very different to, forget the shot stopping, okay? He brought something very different to that back four. Remember, this was Harry Maguire and Victor Lindelof, okay? And we were going in at them, we were worried about them. We didn't feel comfortable about them. But what he did is he was able to claim Thank you for muting me, Keane, you bastard. He was able to claim a lot more crosses. He was able to be a bit more vocal. He was communicating. He was shouting a lot more. He was getting players into position, and it worked out. And we conceded a lot less. He's not the answer, and I get that people are frustrated with Henderson with the interview and all that, but I just think he's probably a much better option. And I think that if you've got our 2 best centre backs in front of him, I think Henderson would be a good short-term answer.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was really well rounded off. Julia, I'm going to come back to you because obviously we started that entire topic about shot stopping and stats and stuff like that with yourself. And, Keane and Mark have just sort of gone off on one there. So I'm going to give you a chance to sort of rebuttal before we move on to a sort of a final topic as we wrap up tonight. So when you think about the stats and when you think about the percentages and stuff like that, do you still think that he's a good shot stopper? Is it, or is it a bit of a misnomer, as Mark was so poetically saying?
Well, I mean, the headline on my thing pretty much sums up tonight. Mark no, I mean, I've had people in comments say there that I want to address where they're going, "Oh, stop defending De Gea." I'm saying that he's pulled off some good moments, some good saves, but on the whole, he isn't, not anymore. He used to be in a system where, put it this way, if it was a different style, like under Jose, for example, and we had De Gea and Maguire, I don't think we'd be questioning things as much as we do about them today under Ten Hag, because I think they both fit that profile of play a bit more. Whereas in the system, they're not. We're questioning a lot of things about them, and I think that De Gea has regressed in the last. I've said this about De Gea. He went to the World Cup in 2018 and never came back. He went to the World Cup as the best in the world. He made that almost that one mistake against Ronaldo, and it was completely different. You could argue that when he did sign that new contract in 2019, it would have been ridiculous to say otherwise, that was the wrong decision. At the time, we were all saying he's had a bad season. Let's hope he can come back. Let's hope we can get him back to his best. But at the start of last season, he was showing some signs of almost being back to his best. But in the 5 years since the World Cup, he hasn't. So there's a strong argument. I can sit here and say he's produced some good moments. I think we can all agree that he's made some good saves this season. He's pulled off some moments that maybe kept us in games. But that's not that significant. Do you know what I mean? That's almost as far as it goes. So it's very clear that there's been a regression, and you could argue he only found his way back in the team because of Henderson got ill, and Henderson never got his place back from that.
Yeah, Ollie liked him, didn't he? Sure, Ollie liked him. at the time.
Supposedly, according to Dean Henderson.
I think there's an element of Henderson was told he'd be number one, but circumstances change. And you can make a case that for a goalkeeper, was he doing enough in training to warrant getting that starting place back? It's one of those things.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people on Twitter are acting like Dean Henderson is the answer. I don't think he's the answer. I said that earlier. I said that he's probably a short-term answer for next season, but that's from the theory that I don't think we'll buy a new goalkeeper this summer. I actually think unless we get someone on a free, which the only person I can think of is Timo Horn from Cologne.
Is Manuel Neuer available on free? Is he out of contract in this?
I was thinking about that, but I'd only consider that if Nagelsmann was still in the job.
And if you banned him from ever skiing ever again.
Yeah, but I don't see us finding the long-term replacement this summer. I think based on what's happening currently as it stands, we'll see Dean Henderson have his say maybe in pre-season. Long-term, we need a new goalkeeper, and that's the bottom line. I'm just
going to jump in there because that's what we're going to finish. We're going to finish on the discussion of a long-term goalkeeper, and I just want to quickly address a couple of comments. Henderson being a leak, obviously, I think that is something
that's true. That's very true.
I do. Yeah, I was going to say I do think he's part of that crop of players that Pogba, Lingard, Henderson, that decided that they were going to start feeding information. There's no doubt in my mind that since they left the club, the leaks stopped. But as a stopgap, it's one of those, do you give him a second chance, you bring him back in, but we'll touch on that in a second. But I agree that he was one of the leaks. And also, what is it with Manchester United and us always having a divisive player that divides a fan base? Why I don't see other clubs being like, KDB or Bernardo Silva. Do you know what I mean? Whereas we've always been like, your Martial FC or your Rashford FC or like Pogba versus Bruno. And now it's so boring. And I've said this for years. Like, Mark, we've been doing streams together now for quite some time. And obviously Keane, so have we. But I've been saying, it never would have been a thing back in the day. You wouldn't have had like Yap Stam versus Steve Bruce, would you? Like, do you know what I mean? You wouldn't have people on Twitter being like, Yip Yap season and stuff. So I don't understand what it is about this club as to why we end up with such a polarising position with our players. And players do go past the point of David De Gea, should be within his rights a United legend. But he's now at a point where he's stinking up the gaff and players start to turn on him. You've got one half of the fan base going, but he pulls off worldy saves and he's fantastic. And he's got 50, and then you've got the other half, like Mark, who spend all day printing out stats about, what he was having for breakfast 3 weeks ago and how he performed when he was in the under-11 Spain squad. But anyway, moving on then to the final point of the evening. We're wrapping things up quite nicely here. Just pushing towards 10 minutes towards the hour mark. Is Julio's touched on it there that the goalkeeper market is there's not much value in it, let's say, or so people would have you believe. So I'm gonna ask the panel who they would pick to replace David De Gea. You can give me a couple of choices, whether it's a long term or short term. It's a cheap option. It's your perfect option. I don't really care. Just give me who you'd pick to replace him and why. Mark, we'll come to you. I've not come to you first for a while, so you've probably got the stats of everyone's bowel movements in your list, haven't you, or something like that? What their transfer market value is. So
I have. I won't use that one though. Listen, I think there's obviously. I think you're right in saying that maybe goalkeepers are going to cost too much. I know that a lot of people talk about Costa for Porto. Now his shot stopping is excellent. His penalty saving is excellent. He is far more commanding. The problem I have, and the jury's still out with him, is that he is in the Portuguese league, where really there's only 2 or 3 teams. No one really sort of pressing very high. Nobody really, using any sort of physicality. But then saying that on the other side, he's also been very good in the Champions League. But for me, I think the jury's still out for him. In comparison to David Raya, 70% save percentage, David Raya's got 76.6. But on that, he also has 8.5%, almost 10% stopping crosses compared to David De Gea, who's only got 3%. So that kind of works within itself. You have less areas, you claim more balls, so you don't have it drop to another player. They get a second ball and then have another shot, which then he doesn't save. Do you see what I mean? Alisson, obviously, you're absolutely right, best keeper in the world. His stats for all of those things far better than anyone else. I think Nick Pope, jury's a bit out for him as well. He's got a better shot stopping ability, but he's got the best stopping crosses percentage. So again, it's all sort of swings and roundabouts, and I think there's lots of different things that you need to look at for a goalkeeper, but you need to try and take the best medium. But I would probably say for me, Raya, I think is probably one of the best options. I think if he's there for 40 million, which we've seen probably from various sources now, I think that maybe he could be one of the ones for me at least.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you, Evan, for this poetry in motion that's on screen here. It's absolutely spot on. And also, let's not pretend like Buffon didn't go from team to team towards the end, stinking the places up, wanting to go and win the Champions League, and just, if anything, he kept his teams from winning the Champions League. Julio, I'll come to you next. Keane, I hope you're ready to finish the show with your suggestions. But Julio, give us what keepers, if you're out. I mean, obviously, I know you're probably not as anti De Gea as Mark is with all his stats. I'm the neutral host this evening, so I'm obviously not really putting my opinion into anything. You might be up for De Gea for another year, but if not, who is it that you'd look to bring in?
Well, I think De Gea for another year is almost like an acceptance, but that's just an acceptance based on the club being incompetent and not being able to replace anything or anyone, given what's happened, the reports around the budget. But listen, a couple of months ago, I wanted to just say Manuel Neuer just because it was 12 years too late and to be a bit different for a change because it looked like he was falling out with everyone at Bayern Munich and probably looking for a way out. I don't think that will happen given the managerial change as well. I think that he would have been, even though I still think he would have been a more competent option between our sticks this season than De Gea or anyone else on the payroll for that matter. My two options to go a bit different because regarding what Mark said regarding Costa, Ederson was from the Portuguese league, so you could argue there's a very similarity with that. But I'm sure over the years we've seen so many transfers and thought, oh, he could be this because someone else made that move and he hasn't produced for us. I can't think of one off the top of my head, annoyingly. But the two I'd go for, just the names I want to throw in there are Onana and Maignan, who are both playing tonight. Obviously, Milan haven't had a good start, didn't have a good start tonight. But Maignan has shown a lot of good signs this season. And Onana simply because I think there are reports come out this week that we're interested in him. But, I think it's one of those reports that could be where it's, Ten Hag used to play with him and it's Man United. Quick, just we can make that link there. We can, you could argue maybe there's something in it, or it's just journalists being journalists. But yeah, they both, especially Onana, simply because Ten Hag's worked with him, I think he'd be a good option in goal for us. And he's playing in Serie A now, so he's made that step up in his career. And maybe it might be too soon because I think he's only been there for a year. But given that I don't think we'll properly replace for another year, I think maybe Onana in a year's time, if Chelsea don't overspend for him, he might be a good option to go for.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. I think one of the things with Onana is always as well, though, that he was dropped from the squad under Ten Hag, as far as I'm aware. And I know that was obviously for taking a banned substance accidentally, but I think there's a lot of politics behind the scene with Onana. Mike Maignan, I think, is obviously he's up there as well. Top 3, top 4 goalkeepers in the world. I think he's absolutely mint.
Unrealistic. Granted, unrealistic, but it's just the name I wanted to throw in there.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's absolutely wicked. Keane, I'll come to you. If De Gea's gone, then who do we go for?
Mark already said my pick. Mine was David Raya from Brentford. I really do like him. He's commanding. He can distribute. And he's a decent shot stopper as well. He's the whole package. I'm not going to tell you who I have because that's obviously who I had. I'm going to tell you what I fear. Everton go down. United sign Jordan Pickford.
I suggested this last week somewhere. Oh, God. I can see that
I,
happening.
I hope
I
not.
know Mark doesn't like it.
I'm telling you now, it's the most Richard Arnold, John Murtagh fucking signing ever. Right, let's get rid of De Gea. Who has decent distribution for England? Who could sell a few shirts because he's English? Pickford. Do you know what I mean? It's the most fucking United current board signing. Especially if Everton go down. And he'd probably be about 25 to 30 million. Do you know? I hope that doesn't happen. I can fucking see it happening though. Sorry for my language, but it's gone past 9 o'clock, so I can swear anyway. And it's my channel. If anyone's getting penalised, it's me anyway. So, in fairness, I'm the one getting the email off YouTube, getting the video taken down. But yeah, look, Raya would be the option. Obviously, your man from AC Milan as well is good, even though he conceded a few tonight, but he can't micromanage one game compared to a whole season. Obviously, he's kind of fallen off, but I like Sanchez from Brighton, but he's after falling off in the last kind of 12 months. But yeah, look, Raya would be the option for me. He's Premier League proven. And I don't think, like other keepers, if you're bringing in a Costa, he might have an adjustment period, for maybe a couple of months. Whereas if you bring in Raya, he's used to the league, and if you look at the football Brentford play, it won't be too much of a burden for him to kind of come in and do what Eric Ten Hag wants to do either.
Yeah. I don't disagree with, to be fair, with any of the suggestions. I think they'd all probably be net upgrades on David De Gea. And I think as well, the thing of I just did a comment here, Trevor talking about, it was a horrible joke that Onana would be good, but O'Grandon would be a better choice. It's horrendous. But just to go back to his thing about Alisson being top for mistakes, the thing though is that Alisson's a proactive goalkeeper. I'd rather my goalkeeper is proactive and makes a mistake every now and again than my goalkeeper not be proactive and still make a load of mistakes. You know what I mean? It almost comes with the territory of, it's the same as judging a really good creative midfielder by a stat where it's about possession lost. It's like, well, of course they're losing possession because they're trying
A bit
fancy
like Bruno
balls.
Fernandes.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? That chance created stat was ridiculous as well, by the way. That's for another time. I think all that is, for me, I'm a big Costa fan. I think he'd be absolutely wicked. David Raya, though, is, he's the one that keeps cropping up now and again. Someone big will be in for him, and you imagine that he makes the move, but he ticks all the metrics. They both do, realistically. The only thing that David Raya has that Costa doesn't have is that he's played in the Premier League for the last couple of seasons, and there's less of a risk there of him being a big money flop. But I think to dismiss Costa as an option just because he's from Portugal is a bit daft. I think the Portuguese league is a pretty wicked league. There's a lot of high technical players, and some of the transfers. Even you look at Enzo Fernandez coming in, the price tag he's had on going into that Chelsea team that's been struggling. I think Enzo Fernandez has been wicked since he come in, since he joined. And he looks like a baller. He's only going to get better. Do you know what I mean? And that's somebody that played in Portugal for, granted it was only for a year, but still. But I think there is plenty of value in the keeper market. The biggest thing we've got to have now, and the decision is that if David De Gea is going to sign a new contract, what is his responsibility going to be? Because for me, if he signs a contract to be a number two, right? What do you most associate with a number two goalkeeper? It's cup competitions, and the occasional less important game here. But David De Gea in a cup competition is not really the man I want going for that. He's notoriously bad at saving penalties. So, if you're in a cup competition and all of a sudden you find yourself in a penalty shootout where your number two is David De Gea, who has one of the worst penalty save percentages I've ever seen in my life. He's not great in big games, realistically. In the few big games that we've played since Fergie, I don't remember him having a phenomenal.
Only against Arsenal, I think.
Phenomenal game. You know what I mean? So,
Liverpool 2014 at Old Trafford as well, but that's 3 in so many years.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So so is that the sort of number two goalkeeper that we want knocking around the club? And I'd also just like to come. Obviously, I know Enzo Fernandez is not Portuguese. I'm talking about the fact that he played in the Portuguese league. But thank you, Trevor. I really appreciate that. My geography isn't the best at times, anyway. So it's the case of and then do we risk the issue of David De Gea sitting on the bench and his legacy at United crumbling even further as a number two? Victor Valdez, this is a really random tangent. Victor Valdez came and decided to be a number two at United after we gave him the rehabilitation. And it absolutely ruined his legacy. He was one of the best goalkeepers that we'd never seen, realistically. And all because he fell out with Louis van Gaal, which, wasn't allowed to wear the Mancunian crest on his suit jacket anymore and were forced to play with the under-23s. No one talks about him. He ended up at Borough.
Remember that. Jamie, can I just come in there for 2 seconds? You mentioned De Gea being in two, right? On a renewed deal, he's going to be on 200 grand a week as a number 2 on the bench and realistically playing probably about less than 10 games in the season. We're talking about reducing the wage bill and becoming a more stable club. That could set a bad precedent again, where a fringe player has been brought in. They're brought in to play, second fiddle to Bruno, second fiddle to, let's say, Casemiro or whoever it may be in midfield. I'm just saying, for example, they're saying the number 2 goalkeeper there is sitting on 200 grand a week. So I want at least 150 as a starting point. I think that's where we'll be treading on kind of dangerous territory as well if we are to keep him as a number 2 and then put him on that 200 grand a week contract as well. That's dangerous as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, talking tennis. You're spot on, and that's what
that's John Silk. That is good to have you with us, buddy. We need to get you on soon, brother.
Yeah, 100%. And something that this club has been so poor at doing over the last few years is whacking undeserving mediocre players on massive contracts, and then it creates these horrible situations for us where, granted, I still stand by that Ander Herrera left because he was greedy, but he does have, the right to turn around and go, you're paying this player 200 grand a week and I'm more important than them. Why would you pay me more? So I do understand, and you're spot on. Right, Julio, you want to come in about David Raya quickly, and then we'll wrap things up.
Yeah, I also want to come in on something on De Gea quickly as well, actually, now that Keane mentions it. I think there's also an acceptance from De Gea that if he leaves, he's not going anywhere close to not just money, but also status of club. Because I think he'd prefer a move back to Spain, but none of the top Spanish clubs will have him because they've all got set goalkeepers. I think even in Italy, they're starting to look for a different style of goalkeeper. Obviously, Milan have Maignan, Inter have Onana, Juventus have Szczesny, who I don't think has caused any questions there. So I think if you look at top clubs around Europe, I don't think they're going to want him on that kind of money either. And on Raya, I believe he's going to enter the last year of his contract. And I don't think he's worth £40 million, especially in the last year of his contract. That's just what I want. I don't like his height as well. Personally, I think 6 foot is too short for a goalkeeper, regardless of the fact that I love Jan Sommer and what he's done at Switzerland.
Yeah, what about Licha?
I know that sounds bad, but for a goalkeeper, I just prefer for them to be a little bit taller. But that's just clutching at straws. Raya has a lot of...
Sorry if I ruined your train of thought there, but I've been a dick.
No, I've said my piece. That's it. I'm just going to...
No, you know what? No, you know what? I know what you mean. Is that it is one of those things in it that you see a 6 foot goalkeeper compared with like Nick Pope, who's a giant, and you automatically assume that the 6'6" goalkeeper. And I do get that predisposition about players' sizes and stuff. But fingers crossed, with what Lissandro has shown us this season, is that size doesn't always matter. It's what you do with the tools that you're given that is the best thing. Right, on that slightly weird note. We're going to start to wrap things up here. The thing is that as a United fan, we're probably going to be having this conversation again in 12 months' time because he'll still be here. He'll still be on ridiculous wages and will have just finished 6th in the Premier League because of a howler from David De Gea, I imagine. But we're thinking positive into the Erik ten Hag reign. It's been a decent season, all things considered. But I just want to say, massive thanks to Mark, to Keane, to Julio. It's been a great conversation. Thanks to everyone in the comments as well. Thank you all as well to put up with me. I'm full of the flu. Don't know if you can hear it, but I'm absolutely dosed up in a minute, so my brain isn't working fully. But thank you very much, everyone, for coming along with us. Let us know. Keep watching it back. Get those viewing numbers up. Make sure you subscribe to the Weekly Armchair Sports Talk. Follow us on Twitter, and everyone follow all the guys that were on the channel tonight. And we'll see you next time. Au revoir.